Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming and joining us today. I'm Richard Carmona. I've been a deputy sheriff with the Pima County Sheriff's Department over 30 years, serving in multiple positions during that time. But we're not here to talk about me today. This is a sad day for the Pima County Sheriff's Department, that we have to step up with our deputies, our brothers in arms from the Tucson Police Department and their association, the Tucson Police Officers Association, to talk about some of the things that you've read in the press that have embarrassed us, that have humiliated us, that have made us have to have an event like this to defend ourselves because a few have taken advantage of a great sheriff's department, which caused our morale to plummet, caused people to want to transfer and leave the agency, families disrupted because of intimidation, coercion, retaliation because they spoke the truth. That's why we're here today. That's why the Deputy Sheriff's Association and Corrections Officers Association asked me to come forward and open this meeting to have a discussion with the public, because the public deserves to know, because we understand that we have the privilege to serve you, and we have to earn that privilege every single day. And that's the way all of us in the Pima County Sheriff's Department are, except for a select few who have taken it upon themselves to create an altered universe, to create a hostile work environment for some, to deprive certain officers of promotion, to assign them hardship assignments when they didn't deserve that. All because officers told the truth about the issues. So today I want to tell you how I became involved. I want to tell you what the general issues are. I will give that overview, and then we have membership from the Tucson Police Officers Association who have joined us in arms to speak out to the public that this is unacceptable behavior, and you, the public, need to understand what's going on. Sergeant Kevin Kubitsky, who is the head of the Pima County Sheriff's Department Deputies Association, will be representing our corrections officers as well. And I want to put this all in context for you, and at the end, I'm happy to answer any and all questions you have. This is a very, very important issue. To all of us standing here, professional officers that have the privilege to serve you, we recognize that integrity is our best tool. At a time when police officers are being questioned on how they practice, I have the confidence in my department that we provide the best care and keep your city safe and your county safe, because these officers serve selflessly. They get up every day and they do what's right for you. They put themselves in harm's way every day to care for you. And they are as offended as I am that a leader in Sheriff Nanos, Radke, and deceased Gagnon Payne took it upon themselves to discredit our department, to have our morale plummet. Good officers want to leave our department now, want to retire, transfer, because it's that bad. But what they don't realize, and why you see so many people in this room today, is that leadership by intimidation never works. It fails. Historically, you'll see it all the time. Governments fail, nations fail, and departments fail when you try and coerce and intimidate people to do things that they know are illegal, immoral, unethical, and unprofessional. That's what we're faced with today. So, with that in mind, I speak from the heart, as you can see, because this is not a job. These are my family members. I have risked my life with them. They have risked their life for me. Every day we turn out, you never know what's going to happen. But I've had the privilege to work with these fine men and women. And the reason I'm here today is because many of them called over many months to say, Rich, we can't speak up. We've been told we'll be transferred. Our careers will be over unless we line up behind Sheriff Nanos, unless we look the other way when we see things that are bad being done. Broke my heart, because these are kids. I was their training officer. These are kids that worked for me on a SWAT team when I was a SWAT team leader and a detective. So this is I'm not just a spokesperson. This is my family, folks. And we all speak as one, that this behavior is unacceptable. And up until today, we could only get a few people to speak to the press because they were so in fear. People telling me, I got 3 kids and a mortgage. If they make it difficult for me, I can't afford to live. I got kids in college. But today what you see is the people here are not willing to accept that type of behavior any longer. They're willing to risk their careers. They're willing to risk everything they've sacrificed for to represent us in the community, because they understand that it's intolerable to consider living under this reign of terror that has been perpetuated by Sheriff Nanos, Chief Deputy Radke, and the deceased Chief of Staff, Brad Gagnon-Payne. Now, I'll point out to you, to put this in context, Sheriff Nanos is an appointed sheriff. He's never been elected. That's a political appointment because our great sheriff before him decided to retire. His first two appointments were Chief Deputy Radke, and then they created a new position, a new political position called Chief of Staff. Never existed before. Why do you need a Chief of Staff if you have a Chief Deputy? And let me point out that that's an expensive position because you have a chief that just retired who's making retirement dollars of $100,000 or more, and now you give him another job for $100,000. That's despicable. Plus, you didn't need the position, and it's a time when all of our deputies have been deprived of the pay that they were offered, that they were entitled to. And Sergeant Kubisky fought for that. And he said, no, this is not decompression. You've disadvantaged my officers. Sergeant Kubisky went toe-to-toe with Nanos and Gagnon-Payne and Radke and said, no, you're lying. The union doesn't support you. We put our lives on the line every day, and yet what did you do? You discredit us. You tell us everything will be fine. We're making less money. And because of that, Sergeant Kubisky was put on a blacklist. Sergeant Kubisky was demoted from detective to patrol. He was sent out to a shift that wasn't desirable. And we have many cases like that are represented here that we'll go over if necessary. But I want you to make no mistake. This is not hearsay. It's not hyperbole. These are real police officers here who have been disadvantaged by this administration. And you, the people, need to know that. It is an election season, but this is not about elections. It is about an informed public being able to make a good decision at the polls when they understand who these people are. This is about police officers standing up and saying, no mas. No more corruption. No more intimidation. No more coercion. It is my privilege to come before you to speak for my officers, and you'll hear from them too. But because of the fact that they were so afraid, I was asked to get involved, which I did months ago, and I'm going to tell you how that happened. It broke my heart, as I said earlier, that they feared for their paychecks and their future. And we'll give you specific examples if you ask the question. So many months ago when I decided to get involved, I actually had a meeting with Sheriff Nanos, and I said, I can't support you. The two people that you've decided to appoint and create this new position that was not necessary, but clearly depicted cronyism, these are the people, the two least respected officers in our department, because they have a history of retaliation. They have a history of doing things that are less than professional. I said, Chris, you need to surround yourself by officers who have great credibility in the department, because your future will be defined by that, because nobody knows you. This is a critical juncture in your life. And so he ignored me. And I said, then I can't support you. I will be available to my men and women in the department. They know how to reach me. I will not come to my office any longer, and I will do my work from outside, because I will not support this kind of a problem. And the problem grew. And eventually it came to the public's attention when the Arizona Star broke that story about Chief Deputy Radke directing one of his commanders to fire a Mexican lady who was making tacos and burritos in the cafe. Okay? Everybody loved her. Nice lady. They fire her. And the guy who was a lieutenant at the time said, why, boss? Just take care of it. So he was given an order. He said, ma'am, I'm sorry, we have to let you go. And then, all of a sudden, what happens? We have Chief Radke's niece show up and is running the cafe. And by their own admission, taking public funds to help her in that regard. No RFP, did not reach out to the blind as they were supposed to, okay? Bypassed all the rules and regulations, and this is a Chief Radke who has been in administration over a quarter of a century, has written more contracts than anybody. So you can't plead ignorance. Can't plead ignorance because you're the expert in contracts. And what we find then is a captain who gets up there, Buddy James, and says, oh, well, it was a problem, and our officers We needed to do this quickly, he said, because our officers are afraid to go to lunch in uniform on the South Side. It's in the Arizona Star. Take a look. That's the most absurd thing I ever heard. I've been in the department 30 years. I mean, if we have a problem, it's 6 of us going to lunch sometimes, okay, at the same place. Not one in uniform. In fact, we are proud to be in uniform in the community because even if we eat lunch, it offers a modicum of safety to the people because they see police officers, deputies there. And then you see the string of lies that rolled out. Nanos makes a comment. Yes, I was aware about it. We had to do it because it was, good for our deputies. And then Radke comments. And his comments were the most problematic of all. He said, I had nothing to do with it. It was I gave my niece's name to the powers that be, and they made the decision. Everybody in the department, when we saw the Arizona Star article, said that's a lie, because he was pushing we knew it. But none of us knew what had happened. We thought she won the RFP. We thought that they went through the process. But no. And then they opened a second cafe at the jail. And what happens there? The public health department shuts them down because they didn't even get the permits. But meanwhile, the captain slips and gives to the press that they use RICO funds. Those are restricted federal dollars. Then they change the story the next day. So the reason I'm telling you all of this, that's what catches the FBI attention. They go, well, misuse of funds, criminal activity. FBI has the responsibility for police corruption. That's where it all started. And then they started calling us in and asking us questions. And within days, the word spread through the department that there was an FBI investigation on police corruption centered on Sheriff Nanos, Chief Gagnapane, and Chief Radke. And you know what happened, the first thing? I won't use the words that were coming out of the command floor up there on the 3rd floor, but they identified Sergeant Kubitsky as one of the people that went and spoke to the FBI, because the FBI called him and said, we'd like you to tell us what you know. And you know what they said? He's an effing FBI informant. His career is done. And what happened to him? He got demoted. He got put on a less desirable shift. His wife was harassed, who works for the sheriff's department. And that enraged me and got me even more emboldened to ensure that this cannot be perpetuated. The FBI investigation has been going on now 8, 9, 10 months. They've interviewed a lot of people. All of those people have called me. Maybe most, because to be honest with you, I can't tell you. I don't know everybody that's been interviewed, but I know a lot of people have been interviewed. And what was interesting was when they called me, they say, oh my God, Rich, they asked me this. They asked me for documents. Did I see that? But what was interesting about all of the questions that everybody was asked, they all centered around 3 individuals, Nanos, Radke, Gagnapane. And then during that investigation, Chief of Staff Gagnapane commits suicide, coincident with finding out that he was a principal in a criminal investigation for his actions. You never read about that in the press. It was covered up. They played it down. He just died. There was no mention of it in the press, which further concerned me. And then I have stories from a lot of these people here who would call me and say, you can't believe how I was belittled and berated in public, that I had said something, or that I had even made a suggestion that there's something could be wrong, and being challenged with, your career's over, you're going to get transferred, and so on. So I'll stop there just because I want to set the stage. This is not a little issue. This is a major, major problem. The FBI being involved for as long as they have, and all the interviews they've done tell you this is significant. My goal here, and the goal of my fellow officers, is to expose this illegal, immoral, unethical, unprofessional, and possibly criminal behavior, because you deserve better. You, the people, deserve better. We serve at your pleasure. We serve to serve you, and we have to earn the right to serve you every day because of our integrity. And that's why all of these people behind me here who are active officers are willing to sacrifice their own careers because they refuse to live under this reign of terror and intimidation and coercion. With that, I'll stop. I want to ask Sergeant Kubitsky to come up and give you some remarks, and then Jason from the Tucson Police Officers Association will make some remarks. I'll close up and then answer any questions that you may have. Sergeant Kubitsky.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sergeant Kubitsky. I'm the president of the Pima County Deputy Sheriff's Association. I'm also representing the Pima County Correction Officers Association here today because they could not come. The combined associations make up a majority of the department members as it applies to commissioned and non-commissioned staff. The associations have voted, and for the first time have unprecedentedly voted at a rate of 3 times the normal vote rate for our own presidency to endorse the opposition to the incumbent Sheriff Nanos because of the reasons stated by Dr. Carmona. The issues presented are witnessed on a daily basis and very much a consideration in the choice making of each individual deputy, corrections officer, and sergeant. We are reaching out to the community and their families to hear the deputies, corrections officers, and sergeants rather than just listen to the words being said by upper command. Hear our concerns for your safety. Hear our devotion to your family's protection, and hear our humbleness for your support and backing. If you listen to the false and misleading statements, we are all going to crumble. The agency's going to crumble. So I beg you to take time to talk to individuals. We're not allowed to talk to you when we're on duty. We get a lot of that when people come up to us. So please pull us aside when you see us off duty. You see us wearing a shirt, something significant like this, and ask. We'll be happy to share with you our feelings and our sentiments about what's going on. The men and women that you see standing behind you, they are the bravest that we have in the department. I can, without a doubt, tell you that we have tons that want to be here that are too afraid to show up because they feel the retaliation would be too great. And that's been the standard for as long as I can remember, and especially since the incumbent sheriff took over. So thank you. Jason?
Have Jason come up for a second. Let me just make another. I want to just emphasize something before Jason speaks. Sergeant Kubitsky deserves a Medal of Valor for what he's done. He has never wavered. His job was on the line. He got demoted. He got transferred. He got harassed. He had supervisors that would come down that were in Nanos's dysfunctional chain and would stand in his door as a detective supervisor and just stare at him like this. Just stare. And then they took his administrative support away and told him he had to write his own reports. Never done. Never done. They did everything they could to harass him. But you know what? He's a Marine, and he wouldn't give in. He wouldn't give in. He stayed with it. So as I told him last night when I had the privilege to represent my fellow officers, is that, man, I'm proud of you. I said, you know, this is as bad as, you know, going into the most high-risk environment you can possibly be in. And he and his wife, who's here, where's Selena? Selena, where are you? You see that beautiful girl there? That's his wife. She works as a civilian there, and she's been harassed on a daily basis as well because that's his wife. She stood by him. She did not waver. She deserves your applause, too. Jason?
Good afternoon. I'm Roland Gutierrez. I'm the president of the Tucson Police Officers Association. I'm honored and humbled to be here before you today. I was contacted by Sergeant Kubitsky many months ago, and he asked us for our support. I'm honored and humbled to be here to offer the support of the Tucson Police Officers Association to the men and women of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Been working closely with Kevin for many months now, and again, Kevin, I just want to tell you that on behalf of the Tucson Police Officers Association, we're here to give you any assistance that you need, and we're always going to be here for our brothers and sisters of the Sheriff's Department. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are numerous anecdotes, stories I can tell you of officers that are sitting here, like the former detective Therese Duchesne, who was demoted because she attempted to expose a pornography challenge at the jail involving a corrections officer. She was admonished, the case disappeared, the person's computer disappeared, and he was allowed to retire, although she was vehemently opposed because she couldn't complete her investigation. And this is just one of the things. All of these people have followed the chain of command when they had significant complaints, because when they came to me, I said, okay, I believe you now. I've studied the situation. I'm going to speak out, and this is over months. But I said, you must follow the policy. Go ahead and put in a complaint, have it go up the chain of command. Unfortunately, what we hadn't realized is that the chain of command had changed. Now, I was at the top of the chain of command as well. But when Chief of Staff Gagnapane came back in, As a civilian, he all of a sudden was in charge of internal affairs. So all the complaints went to him and they disappeared. Okay? So the system was rigged from the very beginning, that you could not even put in a reasonable complaint and get it adjudicated if you didn't buy into the system. So I'm going to stop and not, with any specific anecdotes. If anybody wants information, I'll do the best I can. Understand that there's an ongoing major FBI investigation, and we are very sensitive to not compromising their investigation, and we are eternally grateful that the FBI saw it to be able to step in and saw that there was enough what we call probable cause to begin an investigation regarding police corruption involving Sheriff Nanos, Chief Gagnon, and Chief Deputy Chris Radke. With that, I'll stop. Happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure Kevin and the TPOA guys would. So please fire. And I might add, I'll get you just a second, so I just want to add something. When I walked in here, it almost brought me to tears because we were afraid nobody was going to show up because of the intimidation and coercion and fear. That's the conversation. What do we do if nobody comes? I know they care, but you can see they took off their uniforms, they put on their union clothes, and they basically showed up and know that retribution or harm could come to them. But you know what they realize now? That they can't cause retribution or harm or intimidation against all of us. Now you've got a whole force standing up and saying no. It's going to make it very difficult for them to do that now. Plus, Kevin is a whistleblower, I'm a whistleblower, Teresa's a whistleblower, and there's protections in being a whistleblower now. Okay? I'm not worried about me. I have other jobs. Okay? I'm okay. But you know what? I didn't forget that these are the people that I share my life with for 30 years. And they protected me and I protected them, and together we protect you. So bottom line is, we're a family, we're going to stand together, and this is intolerable, and we want to make sure that you all understand that, so that you make the appropriate decisions, so you get the leadership you deserve. Yes, sir.
First, I want to thank you. Please stand, let's all give them a round of applause. These people are perfect. We have your back, right? Everybody here, everybody agrees with me, we have their back. What I'd like to do is ask you what we can do now to help you with your quest. I mean, obviously I'm going to vote, and I'm not going to vote for Nanos, right? But besides that, what can we do to help you?
I think that this is not a political event, first of all. It is an event specifically to expose corruption in the Pima County Sheriff's Department. That's what it is. We want you to be armed. We want you to go to the polls, and you make your best decision. But they have done a very good job in covering up these and many other things that you haven't heard of. So I want you to be armed with that information. What you can do to help is spread the word. This stuff can go viral. We're fortunate to have the press here. You all have email, you have text, you got Facebook, you got Instagram. Put it out there. Tell the community what you heard. Every citizen here from Ajo up to Mount Lemmon should know what's going on, so that when they do go to the ballot box, when they do their early ballots, which could be 70 or 80% of the vote, okay, the fact is that they don't know. And we know that the strategy that Nanos and Gagnon and Radke has had is they keep, if any of you have seen Sheriff Nanos on TV, you can see why they don't want him on TV, okay? And the point is that their strategy has been to keep him below the radar, because they know that the early ballot may vote straight Democrat, okay? And the fact is, if they can keep him hidden and stay away from all of this stuff that you've heard, then he may get elected. So we decided, not politically, but as information, you all are entitled to know what's going on. So again, I want to emphasize, this is not political. We're not telling you who to vote for, but we want you to be armed with the right information when you decide to make your decision. That's the issue here. Yes, sir. Bud Foster back there.
What was the vote?
80% of the deputies from the Deputy Sheriff's Association and the correction deputies was 80%, and the majority within the corrections officers also voted. I believe the Tucson Police Officers Association basically, what shall we call it? Well, was it a no confidence for Nanos, or how did you guys come about what you said?
In regards to the election?
Yeah, well, not so much who to vote for, but the thing, my understanding is your membership. Okay, and the reason was for the information that you've heard, correct? Okay, so I mean, this is, think about it, it's unprecedented. You have an appointed sheriff who's sitting, and you have All your police leadership here telling you, we don't have confidence in that person, or the people he supports, the people that he has appointed to leadership positions who continue to promulgate this reign of terror, coercion, intimidation, and so on. I think that's unprecedented. Yes, ma'am.
What advice do you give the current citizens who may have been harassed? I mean, it may be a bigger problem than what's realized. I mean, throughout the community, what advice do you give the people who have been coerced or intimidated?
Well, I think that's a good point, and I'll tell you there's a number of things that have happened recently that are quite embarrassing. When the people lose confidence in their law enforcement, then they don't go and talk to them. I have no doubt that if you stop any one of these officers here and said, I have a problem, they will sit there and talk to you. They'll take a report, they'll drive you home, they'll do whatever, because they care. They care. And we understand that it is earning your support every day that's important. So at this point, wherever you live, city or county, I'd say talk to that officer. Tell them whatever your problem is. And hopefully they will bring it up the chain of command. But you know what? This meeting today and the press being here shows the value of the so-called fourth estate. Okay? Because where information is suppressed, where people lie, it's the press that brings out these things. And we're fortunate that they're willing to report on this. And in the past, it was very difficult to get anything. One story was done on the Radke thing, and it kind of disappeared. But yet, when you look at all the stories together, what you see is a pattern of illegal, immoral, unethical, unprofessional behavior. And we are indebted to the FBI for doing this investigation, and we are eager as anybody that they announce and do something about it so we can go on and be the law enforcement agency that you all expect and have earned to have. Let's see.
Was there any misconduct in the Gagnon Payne death investigation?
Well, that's a good question. To the best of our knowledge, yes. I've got numerous calls, as some of the folks up here did. So I'm glad you used the term death investigation. When an officer is called to the scene and there's a body on the ground with a gun, even if somebody says it was a suicide, it's a death investigation. It's not a suicide, because you have to gather the evidence. You ask questions. You interview people who were witnesses. You find out things. You get a phone and you look at who made phone calls. You take paperwork out of the car to see was there a message there. And then when you get all that information, you can't still say anything, because the medical examiner has to weigh in and say it was a suicide or it's a homicide based on forensic evidence. So if we go to this crime scene that night, and I got calls from the crime scene, from deputies and detectives that I know, that said, Rich, you can't believe this. Said, Radke and Nanos showed up here and they won't let us interview the suspects. I never heard of. The crime log was not the way it should have been. Evidence that was in the crime scene kind of disappeared.
What evidence?
Wait, I'm not done. Hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done yet. I called them suspects, not that they were guilty, but they were people that you had to interview, okay? You show up on the scene, there's a body. A man over here says, well, I was holding a gun and I gave it to him. A lady over there who happens to be a wife says, we had an argument. Don't you think that's material in an investigation as it relates to a death at a scene? That's Detective 101. Your CID, if I had conducted that crime scene as a detective like they did, I would have been fired and maybe brought up on criminal charges, because they broke the chain of evidence. And this is not me. This is a detective at the scene saying they wouldn't let me do this, and they reported to us that they corrupted it. Now, when you look at it, you say, well, why would that happen? Why would the guy in the department they refer to now as the enforcer, okay? And that's a guy named Joe Cameron. He's a lieutenant, and he has become the driver for Radke, and he goes out at night and he campaigns for him in uniform and does a lot of things he isn't supposed to do, and they're tolerated. He went and picked up Radke, and they came code 3 to the crime scene. I mean, picked up Nanos, and then Radke came to the crime scene. So why would you have a sheriff? Why would you have a sheriff? Why would you have a chief deputy at a crime scene telling detectives not to do things that they're supposed to do, and what they call bagging and tagging all the evidence and putting it into the appropriate chain of custody? All of that was violated. And so when you look at it, if I'm a detective and I'm investigating, I'm saying, so let me understand this. Gagnon Payne was one of the 3. Nanos was appointed sheriff. He appointed those 2 guys. One commits suicide. They just found out there's a federal investigation on police corruption involving them, and they're disrupting the crime scene. See, is it a coincidence? I mean, ask detectives. How many times does a chief and a chief deputy show up and give you directions at a crime scene? So that's what happened, okay? And that's not me. I want you to understand, I am the voice for many officers who have spoken to me, and we gave all the information to the appropriate authorities. But we were all terribly troubled, including the deputies and the detectives at the scene who could not do their job. Other questions? Let me get the press for a second. You just hang on. I'll be right with you. Because he had his hand up before. Go ahead, please.
Has the association publicly called for the resignation of the sheriff and the senior staff? And have they gone to the Board of Supervisors since the appointed and the unappointed?
What was that comment? Somebody said, don't go there. I think, you know, we're still in the infancy in this, and I can't speak for the association, but what I can say is, based on the vote that you've heard of, which is unprecedented from corrections officers, from deputy sheriffs, and the Tucson Police Officers Association, this has never happened before. You have pretty much, it's a vote of no confidence. They're basically saying, we don't trust this guy, okay? And so, I mean, that is unprecedented. It's never happened in the history of our community. And I think that's the message that the public has to realize. It's not a few disgruntled employees, which is what somebody told me. I said, no, in fact, you probably have a few employees that are supportive. You see hundreds that are saying, nah, no mas, that's it. Yes, sir, go ahead.
The investigation up in Marana with the mansion break-ins.
Yes, happy to speak about that.
It was really ugly what I read in the paper and saw on the TV. Did he really stop the investigation?
Well, let me tell you what was conveyed to me by senior commanders who were there at the time around Sheriff Nanos. It's partially true what you probably heard. I don't remember the whole story, but I can tell you that this was a joint task force investigation of youngsters who were breaking into homes and partying and destroying property. So this was big stuff. It was a felony. Bad, you know, a lot of money, a lot of damage. Detectives identify a lot of youngsters and are ready to bring them into custody. And the commander who was with the sheriff at the time tells me he goes, quote unquote, ballistic, screaming that don't they realize they're going to mess up my campaign if I'm seen arresting children. So he said, stop the investigation. And then shortly thereafter, they found out that Chief Radke's nephew was one of the kids. So all of a sudden, no investigation. He said, I'll leave it to you. I'm reporting facts reported to me by a commander who was there when this happened. Okay? To me, that is reprehensible. That is below the dignity of a police officer. It's a breach of integrity and fiduciary responsibility. You have to let the chips fall where they may. And if they're good kids and they make a mistake, you slap them on the hands, that's fine. Okay? But unless you do an investigation, you don't know. So that decision let the public down. And what it further does is to breed distrust in the public when they see their officers at the senior level. But I will tell you that if any of these officers behind me were faced with that, that would have never happened. Because they understand their duty to you. They would have carried out the investigation. They would have gone to the county attorney, said, here's the information I have. Now the county attorney decides if and when what the charges will be. Next question. Yes, sir.
Sure, just want to go back to the gang and pain death investigation.
Yes, sir.
You talked about on K-Gun 9 about the procedure of deputies attending autopsies.
Yes.
And then when Nanos was questioned, he kind of gray area. What is the actual procedure that's usually done?
Detectives, well, having been in CID myself and known all the medical examiners, the typical procedure is once you gather all your evidence and the body is at the morgue with the medical examiner looks at the evidence that the detectives have gotten, you know, what weapon was at the scene, was it a knife, you know, all of that, and then they do the autopsy. And they make sure that it was indeed a suicide. So for instance, you get on the scene and somebody says, oh, it was a suicide. Maybe, but what if the medical examiner does an autopsy and says, gee, the round was fired from 15 feet away? Couldn't have been a suicide. Now, if you don't do the investigation, you don't know that. So I don't know how you can make a determination at the scene without an investigation that it was a suicide. And that's what came out right away when any of the guys here, any detectives would tell you, no, this is a death investigation until I know it's a suicide. Okay? It could be a homicide. So that's a problem. Detectives always go to the autopsy, or at a minimum talk to the medical examiner. Because you can't close your case until the medical examiner validates, yes, in fact, your evidence and my autopsy suggests that this was the cause of death. Now you can close the case as a suicide or a homicide. That's the way it's done. That's routine.
Which sheriffs were at the autopsy? Do you know any
I was told that they were prohibited from going to the autopsy. So I have no information about the autopsy except that officers at the scene said that they were prohibited from attending an autopsy. After that, I don't know what happened. And I've never heard, even in, famous people, you go to the autopsy, It just doesn't make any sense unless you're trying to hide something.